So we're going to start today with a stellar panel that's going to discuss how we can foster diversity through leadership. I'd like to invite our panelists to come to the stage. Alberto Gavazzi with Diageo, Patricia Miron with Microsoft Latin America, Dean John Quelch, University of Miami's Business School, and Alejandra Bailon, who is with Medtronic and will moderate today's panel. So with that, let me pass it on to Alejandra. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon again. Buenas tardes. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and I feel honored to be the moderator of this panel. It will be a conversation with these distinguished panelists. So to start the conversation, I will start asking questions to them so we can hear their perspectives as well as their insights. Then at the end, we will open it up for the audience to ask questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Give me a minute because I need glasses. No way I can read without glasses. And I'm not sharing my age. I'm just saying that I need glasses. Then the first question is for the three of you. Why is it important to promote women's empowerment in your sector industry? And we can start with Patricia.
Okay. So in the technology industry, I think there's really two driving forces behind why we want to promote gender equality and diversity. One is that we know that right now, if you look into the professionals that are in the technology industry, it's not as equal as we'd like it to be. And so we need to be intentional about driving that equality for the exact reason that was mentioned here, because the market is a balanced market between the genders. And so we need those voices of women in order to represent what our products are, not just in the consumer space, but also in the business space. So that's really the first driving force. I think the second driving force is the technology industry is driven by creativity. And creativity only occurs when you bring together diverse viewpoints and you start to connect the dots. And as women, we represent a diverse viewpoint from men. And so having that viewpoint allows us to be more creative and more innovative than we are in a single gender environment.
Thank you, Patricia. Dr. Quelch, I would love to hear your perspective about the same question, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I would totally agree that creativity and fairness are the two driving thrusts in answer to your question. I would just say maybe a couple of words to position academia in this context, if I may. When I look at our own situation at Miami Business School, and I speak for the business school, not for the entire university, but I would say that when we're looking at the staff, the non-academic staff, we have very good representation of women, and we have very good progression of women through empowerment and also through engagement activities that lead to their development and advancement in the organization. When we look at the faculty, that is where business schools are more challenged. And there is great variance from one department to another. And that variance from department to department actually reflects the variance that exists in the workplace as well. So many of us understand that investment banking, for example, is a challenged area when it comes to women rising to the top of that profession. And so perhaps not surprisingly, the finance departments of business schools are also deficient in terms of their gender parity representation, not so much at the entry level, but at the tenured level. So one of the things I just want to say to complement our own finance faculty, They have, in cooperation with the Association for the American Finance Association, which is the major academic organization in finance in the United States, they have taken upon themselves to put on a Women in Finance conference and program that is held at Miami Business School. It's a wonderful event, and it's not about women in the financial workplace. It's about women in finance in academia. And it's an event that happens every year, and it's an event which is a venue similar to this, where women in finance from all over the world, women in finance academia, come to discuss the challenges of developing their careers in the academy in finance. So the staff side, I feel, is in good shape. I think the student mix, we're doing much better. If you look back 20 years in terms of percentage of women represented in MBA programs vis-a-vis today, there has been significant progress. It's still not 50-50 where it should be, but there's been a lot of progress. But it's in the faculty arena that I think we need to think hardest about how to make a difference and do better.
Thank you, Doctor. Alberto?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My answer is going to be more or less in the same line. I start by saying that we promote equality between men and women in the company because first is the right thing to do, right? This is what we stand for. The second thing is that we're a company that works in the consumer goods market. In the consumer goods market is like 60% of the purchasing power, as soon as Susan has said, comes from female. But over 80% of the decision making comes also from women. So for us, it's even more important to have not only a balanced gender in the company, but also one that resembles what the market looks like. So we can take decisions that would mirror what consumers are thinking. Otherwise, we will be taking decisions that do not match consumer needs or what consumer can possibly want. We also believe in creating a society that is equal and creating same opportunities for everybody. And by doing that in the company, we believe that we empower also other companies to do the same. As John was explaining, in Diageo we're in a journey of having equality. So if you look at the leadership level, medium leadership level in the company, we would have about 30%, 70, so it's unbalanced. But as you go up to the higher levels on senior leadership in the company, so in our non-executive board, we would have a 50-50, male-female. On our executive board, it would be a 40-50. So the company has been acting a long time already in promoting that equality and in making sure that we're creating the right opportunities for women to succeed in the company.
Thank you, Alberto. The three of you have emphasized the importance of empowering women, either in academia or in the corporate America environment. And that will take me to the next question. We know that there are still barriers in the environment for us to promote women. So I would like to hear from each of you, what are those barriers that either you have faced or you have experienced?
I'll start?
Yes.
Okay. So the first barrier I would say is culture, right? So there is a culture in Latin America of machismo still, right? And it is more natural to promote men, if you like, than women. So this is something that we need to overcome, and we do actually act upon it in the company, creating sessions about changing the bias, unconscious bias that people might have towards that end. Second barrier is family orientation. So as Susan was saying earlier as well, it is more natural in our society for if one of the two from the couple has to stop working to take care of the kids, it is more natural that women would do that. And that is still portrayed today, although not necessarily the right thing, right? So women will more naturally accept that duty than men, which would resist more the responsibility of looking after a family, for instance. But the real thing to me that is the biggest barrier is wanting to change it, right? So if you put yourself to do it, if you put yourself to actually make a difference, you end up making a difference. We notice that in the company, and we have targets all ourselves to achieve in terms of our leadership of how fast we're going to be changing this in the organization. It is difficult to recruit always people because there isn't enough work label for all the companies that are trying to make that difference in the market. Even if you try to change, we know where to recruit now. There's a lot of opportunity in this room, but we need to make sure that there's availability as well in the market, and that and people are willing to take the risk of continuing their careers.
Thank you, Alberto. Patricia?
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it out well, Alberto, and the sort of the three barriers. I think for me and my experience, the culture one is real, but I think the culture one is challenging because we're not only dealing with a general culture that's applied to Latin America, but we're also dealing with very specific cultures within Latin America. Mm-hmm. And so it's very difficult to recognize all those different cultures and apply solutions that address all of those different cultures. And that even gets magnified when you're working for a global company and you're dealing with all of those different cultures. I've worked both in Latin America and in Japan, and in both countries, I've seen that culture aspect play out in an extremely different way in terms of the barriers. So culture plays a key part of it. And I agree with you that there is the family part of it is and being able to have that balanced life. But what I would also say is, along with that, is there's a lot of assumptions that are made for women as opposed to letting women make their own choice. I've personally seen cases where decisions have been made about women for roles because, she's probably going to be getting pregnant soon, right? And so she won't be able to travel. And so I think there's both the real challenges around it, and then there's the assumptions that are applied to women and their role in the house, and not allowing them to make that decision and make that call for themselves. And then, the third thing is that being conscious as an organization about making sure that you are striving towards a more diverse environment. I have been at Microsoft, we strive to get better and better over time. We don't have goals, but we do push ourselves to have a more diverse workforce. And we look at it both in three levels in the organization. So bringing in new talent and the diversity that we're bringing in there, in middle management and in the senior roles. And so we look at that diversity across the three of them. But I've also been in an environment, I was at Intel for many years, where we would set goals. And that worked for that culture, and we set aspirational goals of where we were going to go, and we would strive towards that. And so, but in both cases, it's about being conscious about it. I think the fourth thing that I would add to what you're going to say is I often see women as their own limiters. And I think we as women have to help other women recognize that we have the ability to do it, and we have the energy and the capacity to balance it. It's just a matter of us wanting to do that. I often see women who will say, well, I can't go after that role because it says that you have to have 10 years of technical experience, and I only have 9, right? And, a man would look at that and say, I have 9, but I have all these other things. And we tend to be a little bit more honest with ourselves and say we have to follow all these steps, right? If I can't check all of them, then I can't apply. And so I think we also have to help ourselves and help the female population to just go for it, because we're a lot more qualified than we think.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on the last point because in my experience, having had the privilege of mentoring many men and women through their career paths in higher education, I really do believe that there can be a courage deficit in the case of women, that they do have the nervousness sometimes about not being able to succeed, and that's a nervousness that men in the organization, whether peers or faculty members, pick up on and then start becoming either dismissive or alternatively, even worse, starting to view that woman as essentially a lifetime research assistant as opposed to a prospective professor who will do great work that will even be better than what they've done. So it is absolutely essential that women have courage when they are in these kind of situations. And I think the courage can be buttressed very effectively through collaborative mentoring by other women, but also there are a lot of, I think we have to, and I think Alberto would agree, we have to underscore there are a lot of men in the workplace who are very fair on this kind of issue. And it's very important that women seek out men as mentors as well as women as mentors to help them make the journey up the organization. I do believe, though, that this courage issue is really just critical, and you just have to get over it. It's actually very important in the following sense as well, that if you look at people who achieve leadership roles in organizations, at some point or points in their career, they have had to show courage, whether or not it's men or women, to get to the top of any organization. Yes, you have to have good judgment. You have to show you can make wise decisions, both business-wise and personnel-wise. But at some point, you can't just go along to get along and expect to be the leader. You have to have the courage to do something that most people are saying can't be done or shouldn't be done, but you believe it has to be done in order for the organization's health long term. And that kind of courage that's essential to being appointed the leader of a Fortune 500 company is important also to the assistant professor who's trying to make a name for herself to be promoted to associate and then full professor as well. So courage, I think, is critical.
Thank you. Based on the barriers that you just mentioned, I would love to hear what each of you do in your leadership position to ensure that you have a diverse group when you are through a selection process. So let's start with Patricia, please.
So, you know, I'm on, every day I'm conscious of the diversity that's in my organization. I'm very deliberate on looking at my key roles and the slates that I have for those roles and making sure that that slate is diverse. I also look at within each of the organizations, you know, sort of my leaders, and I ask them questions about their diversity. I also ask them questions about their inclusion and looking at, you know, how are you doing including, you know, the diversity in your organization, be it gender, be it race, be it even talent. I pride myself on building an organization that is creative and that requires that I manage diversity at all times, because otherwise you don't have that creativity, like I said earlier. So it's an everyday, just as I look at, you know, what is our revenue performance and what is our P&L, I look at our diversity every day as well to ensure that we're building a diverse and vibrant organization where our talent is all being included.
Thank you, Patricia. Dr. Quelch, love to hear your perspective.
So I'm very pleased to be able to say that we have 3 vice deans at Miami Business School, and 2 of the 3 are women. So women hold up half the sky at Miami Business School. I would say in addition to that, that the entry level is much more easy to manage than the middle of the organization when it comes to the faculty side of the equation. So we have the benefit of many excellent candidates who present themselves as PhD candidates looking for entry-level assistant professorships, and we have good choice. We have the ability, fortunately, to make choices where at the margin we can bring into play this kind of criterion. Where we have the biggest problem is when people are advancing through the organization, is their performance level rated internally and externally at a level that is sufficient to warrant their promotion through the organization. And I think at Harvard Business School, where I was previously, there have been a number of very systematic studies done over 20 years worth of faculty promotion and tenure decisions to analyze whether or not there are disparities related to gender. And I think it's fair to say that in that particular case, there were at one time such disparities. But it is absolutely the case, as Susan said at the outset, in relation to corporate boards, that if you have to have a critical mass of, I don't care whether it's women or any other subgroup that you care to identify, you have to have a critical mass in order for the culture of the organization to be distinctively changed and motivated in a new direction. She referred to the fact that you need 3 out of 12 board members as a minimum to make a change in the atmosphere of the board. I can attest to that, having been on several such boards. It's the same within the organization. There needs to be a critical mass of women in the organization, promoted through the organization, for there to be an impact on the culture of the organization. And it's when there's that cultural impact through the presence of women that you really see the benefits of having the diversity. Obviously, we're all appreciative of the point that, you know, a token woman or a token African American is just not going to make a difference, and is going to probably be a huge burden on the person who is the token. But when you can, as a leader of an organization, move it to a point where you have 30, 40, and hopefully going on 50% of people in that organization be women, you then see a powerful difference in the culture.
Thank you, Doctor. Alberto.
Well, equally, when we have a slate, we try to have a balanced slate as well of males and females candidates for any positions in the company. When we recruit outside younger people, if it is a graduate program, we also try to bring 50-50 balance the graduate program into the organization. We have a program in Future Leaders as well, which propels some of the leaders internationally to experience our business internationally, which also is very well balanced in gender. And we have a number of different tools that we try to use in the company to try to retain female talent, to make sure they get to more senior positions in the company, as opposed to losing them for the reasons that we were discussing earlier. So we would have extended maternity leave, for instance. If you're working in a market that a law establishes a certain amount of time, the company would go beyond this amount of time if you request that a company would do that. When you come back, there is flexible work hours as well, so you can, at the same time, make sure that you're raising your family properly and coming back to work as well in a balanced way until you're able to resume your activities. We have, to work with the cultural thing that we were saying before, we have something that we call the spirited a women network, which is a network of women in the company. Some of them very successful, they're in the executive board of the company, that would inspire other women to continue their journey of belief, as you were saying, John, to continue pursuing their career opportunities and making sure they will withstand all the challenges that they have in their career to achieve more senior levels. So we have a number of activities that we put in place to ensure that there is that balanced gender at the end.
Thank you. We have discussed barriers, the actions that you take personally as leaders to make sure that you have diversity, and also mention some of the initiatives that your organizations take. Now I would like to ask a question more about the advice that you can give a woman to remain, or women to remain in the workforce to pursue the leadership positions. So Dr. Quelch, if you don't mind starting?
Yeah, so I think that we've covered some of these things already, but first of all, there is the issue which Alberto referred to of making sure that the practices in the workplace are conducive and assisting of women continuing their participation. And it is absolutely true that, and I think it applies to men as well, that if you leave the workforce or attempt to go half-time in some sort of way, it's extremely difficult to come back in. I mean, many of these organizations, even in academia, are very high-pressured organizations. And, you are either in 100% or you are out. And, to be half in or half out, it just absolutely doesn't work whether you're a man or a woman. But it's very important that organizations have the policies in place to be conducive to women continuing to participate. And many organizations don't really understand the value of that in terms of the retention benefits and the loyalty benefits and the lack of rehiring and retraining costs that are involved if you don't have these policies in place. So that is very, very important. I think secondly, there is, I think, a much greater level of interest on the part of organizations in flexible working structures and flexible working hours that facilitate women to be able to do their work when they need to do it, as opposed to when it has to be done according to some boss who believes you have to be there in person whenever primarily he is there in person. One of the things I learned, there's a CEO at Johnson & Johnson who I have a lot of respect for, named Alex Gorski. And one of the things that Johnson & Johnson is really very, very good at is the entire arena of wellness promotion for its employees. And one thing I learned from him was the following, which was very interesting to me. It was the following, that at Johnson & Johnson, they don't have any care about when you go and use the gym. So just follow me for a moment. So normally, if you think about it, if you had a gym available on site to employees, you would expect to see the employees there, at 7 in the morning before work, lunch hour, or after 5 o'clock, right? But their attitude at Johnson & Johnson is you go to the gym when you feel that you need to go to the gym. When it makes most sense to you to go, that's when you go. We trust you to make that judgment. And I think, that's a sort of small illustration of how you empower and give trust to employees that we can learn from in terms of the overall career management as well. So why do we have to overly control people? Why can't we trust them to do the work that they need to do when it needs to be done? And of course, if team members are inconvenienced and so on, the system will self-discipline itself. You don't need massive rules to constrain people. So I think that, we need a little bit more flexibility in the way in which we approach the issue of enabling people to stay in the work environment when they have other issues and pressures that they have to deal with. I'll make one last point. You know, there are a lot of people who have to care for elderly parents. There are a lot of people who have to care for relatives who are opioid addicted. Does it make sense to have them necessarily come to the workplace under stress and spreading their stress around in the workplace because, you know, they have to be there from 8 to 5? Doesn't it make more sense for them to be allowed to adjust the timing of their engagement with the folks at headquarters or in the office according to their own personal circumstances? Can't we be humane enough to trust people to that degree? So I think, you know, there's a lot more that organizations can do to self-reflect on how much they are really empowering their employees. They talk about it all the time, but do they actually deliver?
Thank you, Dr. Patricia.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying about how are we empowering our employees and their balance and their well-being in their life. I think, you know, some of the advice that I give to women really comes down to a couple of things. One is you know, you have to have the courage, right, to take risks. You know, nothing amazing ever happened without taking a risk first. So it's that recognizing that, you know, failure is not a bad thing. That taking risk is where great reward comes from. And so I often will remind women that taking that risk is critically important to their success and that they need to have the confidence to do it. I think the second thing is taking advantage of all of the different elements that are being offered to you that can help you manage your life, manage your home life, manage your professional life. That's all there. It's at your disposal. Some of it you bring personally, some of it your company brings to you, and you need to use all of those resources because they're there for you. And don't be shy about using it. I met a woman who once said, I'd love to use the gym, but I don't want my boss to see me in there. And I said, well, it's there for a reason. Go use it. And then, you know, I think the third thing is you have to be clear about what you want. At Microsoft, we have this incredible infrastructure around helping people build their career development plan and having clarity across the organization about who wants to go and do what role in what country. I mean, the amount of movement at Microsoft of people going from country to country and organization to organization is actually incredible. Typically, people are in their roles for 3 years and then they move somewhere else. But that movement is only facilitated when, you know, you're deliberate and vocal about what you want. And so I always tell women, you have to tell people what you want. If you don't tell them, you'll never get there.
Alberto.
So to me, I would say a couple of things. So the first thing is, if you can choose, and not everybody can choose, but if you can choose an environment that is going to be friendly to you, that is going to allow you to be who you are, allow you to share your ideas, your thoughts, your beliefs, an environment that is going to welcome what you bring to the table. I think that is critical because that's what everybody wants, regardless of gender, right? So if your company is not giving you that space and you're able to choose, then choose a place that would allow you to. Another advice I would give is dream big, right? So, which is pretty much in line with what you're saying. Dream big, have big dreams, don't have shy dreams or small dreams. It doesn't cost anything to dream. So dream big. You're not going to pay more for a big dream than a small dream. So dream big and make sure that you're fulfilling the dream, that you're making your purpose, that every day that you wake up in the morning from bed, make it your purpose to live that dream. Make it your purpose to make that vision that you have become a reality. And as you were saying, I think it's about believing in yourself, is about having belief that you can. You know, my favorite phrase in the world comes from a guy named Henry Ford. And he said, if you believe you can, you're right. If you believe you can't, you're right. And at the end of the day, that's it. That's what it would take for you to be successful. So to me, it doesn't matter whether you're female or male. The dream is available for you at the same time. It's just a matter of wanting to take it and wanting to live it.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. Dreaming big, taking risks, having the courage for you to be successful. So that takes me to the next question. Based on that you just said, what tips can you offer to the audience about creating meaningful career experiences for themselves?
Should I start?
Yeah.
To me, meaningful career experiences are experiences or careers that you believe you're building something bigger than just your job, right? You're contributing to something more transformational in society, to something bigger to help the people around you, your colleagues, your friends, and people in the company, right? And beyond the company, even the community around you. So I'll go back to the word I used before, which is purpose. You know, every company has a purpose for being, a reason why the company exists, right? Whether it's technology, pharmaceutical, entertainment industry, whatever it might be, the company is there for a reason. What is your reason, right? What is your purpose, and how can you connect your purpose to the purpose of the company? And if you can connect your purpose to the purpose of the company, then you're going to be far more fulfilled. You're going to be feeling that you're creating something much bigger than just your job, right? It becomes an accomplishment that's far bigger than that. I remember a story that I was told once of a person was walking in the street and he was seeing these guys laying down bricks. And he approached this first person and he asked, "What are you doing?" to the first gentleman who was laying down bricks. He said, "I'm building a wall." And he continued his job, manual job, without looking to the person that asked him the question, as if nothing has happened. And then there was this second man, or let's make it a woman, the second person that was there.
You have to.
And as he was laying bricks, this gentleman asked, "What are you doing?" And he stopped, laid down his tools, stood up, and he said, watching the nothing, like he did like this with his hands, "I'm building a cathedral." So he was working with a vision of what he was helping build, and not just laying down a wall. And I think we all have the ability to do that in our jobs. What is it that we're helping shape here? And that would be the
Very
what I
good
would
story. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Patricia?
I think, in addition to dreaming big, and I've talked a little bit about the need to take risk. I think that's really important. I also think it's really important that when you become a member of an organization, that really what that organization's purpose is moves you. And moves you in a way that, it's in your soul. I had a mentor once say to me, "Everyone is someone's hero." And, you can expand on that in many ways, but one way that expanded on me is when you are truly moved by something, it's amazing what you can accomplish, right? Mm-hmm. You can go from, I hate to say it this way, a zero to a hero because you're completely moved by it. And so, I would say you really have to think about what's the purpose of that organization, and does it grab you in the heart and mean something to you in order for you to really have a meaningful career.
Very good, Patricia.
Yeah, so I would endorse those comments, of course, but I think maybe in response I just talk a little bit about what do I think the three most important criteria are to be chosen as the CEO of a major company. And the reason I say that is because I've served on 10 public company boards, and so I've been involved in many CEO selection decisions. And I would say there are three things that boards look at when they're choosing CEOs, to boil it down. One is what I would describe as wisdom. That is a consistent track record of making wise decisions. Principally business decisions, but also, as I alluded to before, personnel decisions as well. The second is the courage point, which I alluded to earlier. You have to have shown your ability to take a stand and make a wise judgment in the face of internal opposition, but a wise judgment for the long term of the organization. And the third actually is a very important criterion which we have not really identified specifically to this point, and that is selflessness. That the people who really get to the top are people who have a 20, 30-year track record of selflessness in their behavior. And it's one thing to have a big dream for yourself. It's also incredibly important to have big dreams for everybody around you. And let me just give you an illustration, small illustration. So let's say it's 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and you're just about to leave for the weekend, but there's someone who's junior to you who has to make a presentation next Monday, and they come to you at 4:30 and say, I'm struggling, I can't get this presentation sorted out in my mind. Can you help me? Well, you could say to yourself, this person is probably a B player. They're probably not going to be around in a year. Why would I waste time at this point when I've got plans for Friday evening to hang around for an hour to help this person? Another person, a rarer person, would say, of course I'll stay and help you. That person will be the CEO of the company. The first person, no matter how brilliant they are as a business person, will never be the CEO of the company if there's a decent board selecting the CEO. The top people are always people who have demonstrated, and I don't mean they demonstrate selflessness, the year they're considered as likely candidates to be the CEO. I'm talking about a 20 to 30 year track record of this behavior. And that's what makes a difference. So, one thing I would recommend to all of you, let me just ask you, how many people in this room are serving on the board of a not-for-profit organization, a school or a charity? I would like, if I came back next year, to see every hand in the room go up, because you will learn so much about leadership if you are on the board of a not-for-profit organization. And the way in which boards of directors work, you can't expect to walk in and be a woman and be on the board of a Fortune 500 company like that. There is a progression in board service that is just like the progression in being an executive in the organization on the way to be the CEO. You have to have board experience, and the best way for women to get board experience is on not-for-profit organizations initially. Go out there, work and serve for a charity at no pay, and if you've done that successfully, there'll be someone who'll recommend you, and when a small for-profit organization needs a director, maybe they'll look at you. But if you haven't had that experience, less likely that you'll be considered. Once you've worked as a board member for a small for-profit company, later on you'll be considered for a larger for-profit company, and you'll move up the ranks over time. That's how board service works, just like line management. It's very important to have those selfless experiences that you can learn from and speak to and have on your CV.
Thank you, Doctor. Very good advice. Now it's time to open it up for the audience to start asking questions. If you would like to hear anything in particular from our panelists.
Hello. Thank you all. My question is about this so-called courage deficit. I find this interesting. I don't know if anyone's seen this PR campaign called Like a Girl, where they interview women in their 20s and 30s and they say, throw like a girl or run like a girl, and they do all those stereotypical types of, girly running, whatever. Then they interview a child and they say, run like a girl, and she runs really hard. What does it mean to run like a girl? It means to run really fast. So how is it that we are going to attack the courage deficit at the place where it starts? Because I don't think women are born differently than men, having less courage than men. It's picked up or learned somewhere. Can't we attack it there instead of having to work backwards later on in the organizations?
So one thing I would mention, which I learned about last week and was very impressed by, was Donna Shalala and Hilary Bass, who's a trustee of the University of Miami, very successful senior partner at Greenberg Traurig. They have a program which is focused on supporting women in sports, young women involved in team sports. And if you look at the percentage of senior executives who were involved in team sports as children, women, it really is very impressive. I think the statistic that I saw in their write-up was 94% of senior women executives were doing team sports as children. That is a great training ground, obviously, for making good judgments, for showing courage. If you're playing soccer, you have to break away and make a run on the goal. Who knows if it's going to work, but you have to have the courage to do it, to break free of the defense on the other team. So that's just a small example of one effort that is being made here at the U to facilitate this particular problem being overcome.
Patricia, Alberto, you would like to add anything?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. So I think as years pass, we would note in the Western Hemisphere that more and more people are having more and more courage, right? I think everybody would agree with that. The only thing that is ridiculous that we're sitting in 2018 and we're still having that conversation, which shouldn't even be a conversation on the table. So to me, it's more about the responsibility that we all have to create the environment where courage isn't necessary, right? So is create a working space that people don't need to be courageous to prevail. Yes, you need to have an ambition, you need to want to grow, you need to want to go forward, but we shouldn't be talking about courage even, right? Because it's not like we're going into a jungle to fight a lion here. You're just going to work every day. So I think it's our responsibility as leaders of our corporations, and everybody in this room has that responsibility, that we would create this environment in places where we operate, whether it's work, communities, everything that we influence.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing I would add is we have to do both, right? We have a generation of women that, there are studies that have shown that women don't have, they don't have the same, they won't naturally stretch themselves in the way that men will. It's true. I mean, we have studies that show it. But then we have this new generation of women, right, that are coming up. And we look at, you just look at the Olympics and all of the new sports and how many of them are truly extreme sports that require an enormous amount of courage beyond what courage that we see on a day-to-day basis. So I think you're right. We have a generation that's coming that's incredibly courageous across the board. But we also have to address it in this moment and in this, in the generations that are currently in the workforce. We have to do both.
We have time for one more question. I think that it was there. Okay, well, anyways.
Hi, everyone. We talked about the cultural barriers for women to enter the workforce and to stay in the workforce. In Diageo, there's extended maternity leave and there's flexible hours for women, but I'm interested in what happens to men If I were an employee at Diageo, I'd be really thankful, but what if I want to share the workload with my husband? Will he have the same opportunities as I have, flexible hours? What are we doing in your companies to balance the scale?
No, and men in Diageo are slaves. We just don't have any. No, just kidding. We have exactly the same programs, right? So if you're a father and you just came back, you could have your extended paternity leave as well, if you request that, right? So we would have the same career advice. We would have the same things that would happen for women in the company. So it's pretty much an equal gender relationship that we're trying to build.
Yeah.
Microsoft, what about?
Same. I mean, we have paternity leave. We have, I mean, what we have available for women, we have similar available for men. I would say increasingly, I hear men more and more comfortable saying, I can't take this call because I have to go get my kids at school. Or, yes, I can talk to you, but I'm going to be making dinner at the same time. So for me, that's very refreshing to hear.
What about the university?
Same.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists for their insights and perspective.